we try to articulate them and go out to the community in a collaboration and ask the questions and see if we could find things out. Our aim was really more to raise awareness and to encourage research, and to really, we saw ourselves as asking questions more than answering them. And it was my hope that after a few years of this, more serious, more scientific studies would get underway, and we get to the bottom of some of these disturbing issues. Again, I said the methodology was non-scientific, but we did identify trends. When we started to track them and we started to discern them, many people said, "Oh, that's not true." And one of them was that external attacks were on the rise. The perpetrators were not only insiders or juveniles, and that there were significant financial losses. And again, remember, this is the timeline here is 95, 96. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the data, but these are some of the slides showing this is the increase over a 5-year period of 6-year period, really, of the internet as a possible source of attack, and likely sources of point of attack, rather, and likely sources of attack. People were very surprised to see, not surprised to see independent hackers as disgruntled employees, but very surprised to see that their corporate competitors were often perceived as likely sources of attack. A lot of people were in denial about that. And then, of course, we started to try to quantify the financial losses, which was perhaps the most controversial part of the survey, and I think most important part of the survey. And these are some of the numbers that we came up with over time in terms of respondents who were able in some way to quantify financial losses. People argued that these figures were ridiculous and outlandish. Some people did, and other people would say, well, they're too low. So I knew we were doing something right, because some people were telling us they were too low and other people were telling us they were too high. So I figured we were groping toward what the actual shape of the elephant was. So just as an exercise for myself, I took 11 news items. I found 11 news items within a 2-year period, 98 and 99, that actually cited some financial loss figures, and tabulated them, and came up with 15 million for 11 news items in that 2-year period. And then I added in the Mitnick case, which was 291 million, and I added in the last Mitnick case, and I added in, we hope, the last Mitnick case, and I added in the 80 million that should be for Melissa, and I came up with a total of 387,252,000. Well, you see it there, 387, and then I compared it to 1 year of the CSI survey, 273 respondents for 265 million, and I said to myself, these are conservative figures. Now, one last thing about this, as I said, what we were hoping was that we would get some models. I can't believe I'm standing here. Can I? Well, I sort of can, but I wish it wasn't so plausible to accept that I'm standing here 10 years later with no models, no real models, whether they're from the academic world or the corporate world or even the world of law enforcement investigation, that we can give people and put in their hands and say, here's how to quantify your financial losses. There are some good they're not good reasons. There are some real reasons why, but we'll go into them as we go along. These models still aren't there, and I think they're very important. So the survey for me, by the way, I ended my participation with it in after 7 years, and I felt really the CSI FBI survey had lived through its life cycle, and really it should either change or we shouldn't just keep going over the same material with the same body of people. But that's another issue. The other thing I did that Spaff alluded to was current future danger. And what I was trying to do there, I called it my anti-book. It was 30 pages long, and the idea was anybody could read it on a plane ride. rather than write a book, I wanted to write an anti-book because I wanted to write something that an executive might actually read and by the end of it be concerned about his organization and what they should be doing. And so now remember, this is a pre-9/11 trajectory of events. And pre-9/11, when you looked at cybercrime and you looked at the potential of what was out there, you realized that this was going to be a huge problem. And the longer I looked at it, the more I realized that you couldn't think about cybercrime, you couldn't think about cyberspace without thinking about the world economy, the global economy. You couldn't think about the World Wide Web without thinking about the global economy, and they kind of the two circles, if you can imagine two circles when they merge, it's really just one circle. And so I started to understand that there were geopolitical and macroeconomic issues, and so these are some of the big economic events that led up to the millennium. And then, of course, on the cyber side, you know, there's this extraordinary fact. I mean, radio took 50 years to reach 50 million people. TV, took 15 years, and the World Wide Web did it in 5 years. So something profound was going on. And then I said, well, there's four major issues. And at this time, I remember this is 1998, 99, 97. People are talking about viruses. Is it safe to use my credit card over the internet? You know, what if I lose all my data? But really, the big issues were then, again, heading toward the millennium, economic espionage, electronic commerce crime, what I call infrastructure attacks, but is often referred to as information warfare or cyber terrorism, and what I was calling at the time personal cyber insecurity, which identity theft is an excellent example of. How many people have seen this picture, or some version of this picture? I know Professor Spafford has. This is some of Bill Cheswick's mapping technology. This is a very large telephone company. We'll just say that. It's a very large telephone company in the United States. And the red veins, the purple veins are the networks they knew about, and the red veins are the networks they didn't know about. So, you know, one picture in many cases is worth 1,000 words. So I wrote Tangled Web about in 2001. I had written my anti-book, then I wrote my book, and this was an attempt to provide some institutional memory to some very important cases that were being investigated, arrests were being made, convictions were being made. There was history being made, but people really weren't seeing the big picture. Again, we were still talking about, is it safe to use my credit card over the web? And so we always talked about, I remember standing in the courtroom when Carlos Salgado, this man, was sentenced. This was an average hacker using common hacking tools, exploiting known vulnerabilities, and he got 87,000 credit cards. And his only mistake was he tried to sell them to an FBI agent, so he ended up in jail. There were firewalls in place. SSL was in place. And yet we were, the media would call and say, well, is it safe to use our credit cards over there? Well, that was never the point. I mean, that's an issue. Is it safe to use my credit card over the web for the single transaction? Yes, yes, the encryption could secure a single transaction to a certain point. But the bigger issue was what's happening with these servers full of information. And then there were some other things like the Phone Master case, which went largely unnoticed during the 90s, where basically this group of hackers for hire, and again, these were not juvenile hackers doing sport hacking. These were people who had a menu. You could get somebody's credit report. You could get their motor vehicle record. You could get Madonna's telephone number for $500. And who were their customers?